Right now, while you're reading this, something is making decisions for you. Not your brain, not the one you think with, the other one. You have a second brain. It's sitting in your gut. It contains roughly 500 million neurons, more than your spinal cord. It produces 95% of the serotonin in your body. It communicates with your brain through a dedicated nerve that runs from your skull to your abdomen. And for most of your life, you've been completely unaware that it's been running half your operating system without asking permission. Scientists call it the enteric nervous system, but that name undersells it. This isn't a support system. This isn't a backup. It's a fully independent neural network that developed from the same embryonic tissue as your brain before your brain even existed. In the womb, before your skull formed, before your cortex took shape, the cells that would become your gut nervous system were already organizing themselves. Your gut brain is, in a very real sense, older than the brain you think with, and it has been making decisions about your life ever since. Start with the basics. Your gut contains more nerve cells than your entire spinal cord. It has its own reflexes, its own memory, its own mood system. If you severed the vagus nerve, the main cable connecting your gut to your brain, your gut would keep functioning. It doesn't need your brain's permission to digest food, move muscles, or regulate the chemistry flowing through your body. Cut the connection entirely, and your gut brain keeps going. Your actual brain, by comparison, would be lost without input from below. This is not a metaphor. This is anatomy. In 1921, physiologist John Newport Langley at Cambridge became the first person to formally describe the enteric nervous system as a distinct entity. He spent years mapping the nerve clusters lining the intestinal walls and concluded something that the medical establishment largely ignored for the next 70 years. The gut operated as its own brain. It didn't just relay signals upward. It processed them, responded to them, and acted on them independently. The medical establishment filed it away. The gut was a digestive organ. The brain was where thinking happened. That division felt clean, it felt obvious, and for decades it held. But here's where it gets strange. In the 1990s, neuroscientist Michael Gershon at Columbia University started pulling that division apart. He spent years studying the enteric nervous system and published his findings in a 1998 book that most scientists quietly dismissed and most of the public never heard of. His central argument was blunt. The gut isn't sending most of its signals up to the brain, it's sending them. And the traffic runs almost entirely the other way. Roughly 90% of the signals traveling along the vagus nerve go from the gut to the brain, not from the brain to the gut. Your brain isn't telling your gut what to do. Your gut is telling your brain how to feel. Think about what that means for a moment. Every time you've had a gut feeling about a person, every time anxiety showed up in your stomach before it showed up in your thoughts, every time you felt dread before you could name the reason, that wasn't metaphor. That was your second brain sending a report upward, and your conscious mind receiving it and calling it intuition. The language got it right by accident. We've always known, somewhere below the level of articulation, that something down there was thinking, but the implications go much further than intuition. Your gut produces 95% of your body's serotonin, not your brain, your gut. Serotonin is the molecule most associated with mood, emotional stability, and the feeling that things are going to be okay. Antidepressants that target serotonin, the most prescribed psychiatric drugs on earth, are designed around a system that lives primarily in your intestines. And yet, for most of the history of psychiatry, no one was looking there. In 2015, researchers at University College Cork published findings from a study that should have restructured the entire field of mental health treatment. They found that specific strains of gut bacteria directly regulate serotonin production in the intestinal lining, not influence it, not correlate with it, regulate it. Change the bacteria and you change the chemistry. Change the chemistry and you change the mood. The study was published in Cell, one of the most respected journals in science. It was not a fringe finding. It was rigorous, replicated, and largely ignored by mainstream psychiatry. Because it required a conclusion most clinicians weren't ready to accept. Your mood is not purely a product of your mind. It is partly a product of organisms living inside you that you have never met, that you cannot control, that have been shaping how you feel about your life since the day you were born. There are roughly 38 trillion microbial cells in your gut. That number is not a rounding error. It is approximately equal to the number of human cells in your entire body. You are, by cell count, about half microbial. These organisms produce neurotransmitters. They signal your vagus nerve. They influence your stress response, your immune system, your your sleep cycles, and your appetite. And they have been doing all of this without any awareness on your part. Here's what makes this harder to sit with. They're not passive passengers. They have interests. Gut bacteria that thrive on sugar produce signals that make you crave sugar. Bacteria that depend on dietary fiber produce signals that make vegetables feel satisfying. When you think you're choosing what to eat, you are partially receiving a recommendation from a colony of organisms that benefit from your choice. The craving you feel at 11 p.m. for something sweet isn't just habit. It may be your microbiome lobbying for its own survival. And then, someone actually tested the influence in the other direction. In 2011, a research team at McMaster University in Canada took two groups of mice. One group was naturally anxious. One group was calm. Then they transplanted gut bacteria from the anxious mice into the calm mice, and gut bacteria from the calm mice into the anxious ones. Within weeks, the personalities had switched. The previously calm mice began displaying anxious behavior. The previously anxious mice became calmer. The behavior didn't follow the brain, it followed the gut. The study was published in Gastroenterology. The researchers were careful with their language, but the implication was clear. Personality, at least in part, can be transferred through gut bacteria, which raises a question most people are not prepared to ask. How much of what you think of as yourself, your anxieties, your moods, your preferences, your emotional responses to the world, is actually you? And how much of it is the population living inside you, running their own agenda through the only communication channel they have? You've spent your entire life assuming that your sense of self lives in your skull, that your identity is a product of your thoughts, your memories, your choices, but your gut brain developed before your head brain. Your enteric nervous system has been operational longer than your prefrontal cortex. The system that regulates your mood, your stress, your gut feelings about danger and safety predates the system you use to think about those feelings by weeks in development and millions of years in evolution. Your gut brain is ancient. Your thinking brain is the new addition, and the new addition has spent most of human history believing it was in charge. There's one more piece, and it changes the picture completely. The vagus nerve is not just a wire. It is a two-way channel that can be deliberately activated. Slow, deep breathing stimulates the vagus nerve directly. It sends a signal downward that tells your gut brain to shift states. Your gut responds by altering its chemical output. That altered output travels back up to your head brain and changes how you feel within minutes. This is why controlled breathing works, not because it's spiritual, because it directly communicates with a brain that controls your emotional chemistry, and that brain responds. Every technique humans have ever developed for managing anxiety, meditation, breath work, the pause before you speak, the long exhale when you're overwhelmed, they all work on the same mechanism. They are all ways of talking to the second brain. We developed them intuitively across cultures, across thousands of years, without ever knowing what we were doing or why it worked. We figured out how to operate the system long before we knew the system existed. So here's what's actually true. You have two brains. One of them you've been aware of your whole life. The other one has been running your emotional chemistry, shaping your moods, influencing your decisions, and sending reports to your conscious mind since before you were born. It contains 500 million neurons. It produces most of your serotonin. It houses a microbial population that has its own survival interests, and it communicates upward 90% of the time, meaning the brain you think with is mostly receiving, not transmitting. The gut feelings you've been dismissing your entire life as irrational, those weren't irrational at all. They were data coming from a system that has been processing information about your body and your environment since long before you had words for any of it. You didn't have one brain making decisions and a body carrying them out. You had two brains negotiating, and only one of them ever told you it existed.